All right, and welcome back to Rent-Free History, the podcast about history that lives rent-free in our heads. I'm your host, Kemdi Wosu, and today I'm joined by Bob Lement. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you could say anything of my name. Your name's much more interesting.
Yeah, yeah. It takes people a couple minutes to like get right, or a couple takes to get right after the first try.
Yeah.
I actually used to have a friend. His name was Dissany, and well, still is. He's not dead or anything, but everyone would pronounce his name like every time we had a substitute teacher, they would see how his name was like spelled, and they would just
Uh-huh.
say Dasani,
Oh, like the
like the
water. Oh,
water.
yeah,
Yeah,
great.
that would just be a thing. So yeah, it just led to like
Hey,
a constant.
Dasani.
Yeah,
Yeah, the thirst quencher.
yeah. But Bob, I would like you could you talk a little more about like kind of like your experience with podcasting? I can tell you're a pretty big fan of it with this whole Adobe animated character you have kind of with you.
So historically, you want to talk about things or right
Uh,
now?
just kind of like how you got into it and then like how it's kind of changed over the years.
Oh my gosh, that could be a long conversation. But we'll
Maybe
make
like
it quick.
like
No, it's all
the
right. I'm
best
just
of
joking.
moments. Yeah.
I'm just teasing you.
Oh, okay.
So I've actually been doing this before there was a term called podcasting. Uh, Podcasting came about in 2004, and I was actually recording on the internet in 1999. So think about that one for a second.
Assuming there was still dial-up back then, there was no
Oh no,
broadband
I
for
had
you to.
broadband. Yeah, I had
Oh, okay,
broadband,
okay.
but it was very early days. So yeah. So anyway, it's been a wild ride, right? So podcasting is now about 20, 22 years old, I guess.
Yeah.
Even though people don't realize that. I mean, they think it all happened in 2020, so they only think it's about 6 years old. But
Mm.
it's been going on for some time now, and it's been a pretty interesting development over the years of everything happening. So yeah, it was very. I wouldn't say it was rudimentary. You don't have tools like Riverside and so forth to use back then, so you just kind of patched it all together when you're recording. In fact, our first recordings for our show were basically a speakerphone and then an external microphone hooked to the computer that would digitally record the show,
Oh,
and that's
wow.
how it was. We did it back then because there wasn't a lot of tools back then. So, but no, it's been interesting, and it's it's one of those things where it's like I suppose if you're lucky in your life, you get to catch the wave of something that's new, and then if you stick with it long enough, eventually it becomes the regular. And I think we're pretty much to that point where now podcasting is the regular, right? So
Yeah.
everybody kind of knows about it. Everybody kind of tunes into something at some point in time, perhaps, and now it's just an everyday part of life where before it was kind of the new thing on the block, and people didn't know about it. So now everybody who's growing up now would be like, "What's the radio? What do you mean you had a radio?" Even though I think most cars still have a radio, do you think people really pay that much attention to them, other than the fact that they can use their phone to send whatever they want to the speakers? I mean, it's kind of like that right now.
I think it depends too. I listen to only one radio station still. Like I
Hmm.
for the most part I listen to just like my phone, like podcast or music on like a streaming app. But
Hmm.
I do occasionally listen to like this one radio station, K Earth 101,
Hmm.
and for the like their morning show. But aside from that it's mainly just
What's
not not
Where's that at? Where's K Earth 101 out of?
I think I want to say LA County, either LA or Orange County, because I know it
Oh, okay.
broadcasts to LA and Orange County. So yeah,
Gotcha. So it's a California thing.
yeah,
Well, that's interesting. No, but I mean, but you're not listening to it all day,
yeah, yeah.
and it's probably not primary, right? So it's not the first thing you go to.
Probably Well, I mean, it's the first thing that's like when I turn on my radio and I go
Mhm.
in my car, I have a touchscreen, or I had a touchscreen in my car, and it doesn't work anymore. So it takes a lot of effort for me to change radio stations. So I usually just keep it on there for the most part. Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah,
It luckily it broke on something that you like as
yeah.
opposed to something that you don't like. Because then what would you do?
Just
Never turn it
never,
on?
yeah, never turn it on.
But I mean, that's kind of the thing. So yeah, but as far as the show's been pretty much the same this whole time. I just get on, and my co-host Miles, we tell stories. We tell stories about things that happen to us or happen around us or things that we witness. And typically those stories are hopefully somewhat funny. And if not funny, then, very strange. So that's kind of been the motif. And then we've been doing it, every week since then. So,
That's cool.
it stacks up. But,
Well,
whatever. This is all fun, though. I love it. We're going to talk about pop culture. I think that's one of those topics that everybody likes. I mean,
yeah,
the interesting thing about pop culture is it's constantly changing, right? So everything rolls in and out, and then just like you know what would be now memes, they stick with culture into the future, even though they're not relevant anymore. And so the original thing is not as relevant as the thing as it is now, but they stick with us and they come with us through, you wouldn't say, so if I say, I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, that something that people still say, but they don't, like hang up the phone. No one hangs up a phone anymore,
yeah,
but you still say it, right? So you're like, oh, I'm
yeah,
going to hang up on you. But the relevance of hanging up is gone because you're pushing a button.
yeah.
And you're not actually putting, it used to be you'd put the hand on a cradle or on some kind of,
Receiver.
receiver, right, and slam it down. And so that's what hanging up was like this you're being angry with the phone. But now, it's, you still say hang up, and we even use it in the, it's in the booklet to tell you how to use the thing. And but it's irrelevant as far as the action of hanging up anymore. So
Yeah,
and there's dozens of those things. I thought you mentioned what we're going to talk about today, and I thought it was funny because, the relevancy of that character, it's more relevant the way we're going to talk about it than it is as a character at this point. So, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting how time passes and things, get forgotten but people hang on to little bits and pieces of stuff in order to, because it's just so ubiquitous.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and going back to what you were saying earlier about, changes that eventually become regular, I think that's the
Hmm.
goal for like all of these characters, because what we're going to be talking about today are those characters that are added to a television show. Those moments when you're watching a TV show that you've maybe feels maybe somewhat way towards, maybe you love it, maybe you hate it, maybe you're ambivalent to it. But you notice one day in a new episode that a new character shows up, and it's a major addition, and they're not going anywhere, at least for now. Um, I like to call this episode Cousin Oliver Syndrome. And yeah. So Cousin Oliver, of course, has to do with a show called The Brady Bunch, where he was a new family member added to the show in an attempt to save flagging ratings. And kind of like the phenomenon that happens with those kind of shows where ratings are low, and they think, oh, we need to add a new character. So, for example, Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo. Um, multiple other shows that add like either a baby or maybe a dog, just something with a cool catchphrase to like bring in a new audience. And they don't just do this with like, like adult shows too. They do this, or sitcoms too. They did this with kid shows. They did this with Power Rangers. I remember there was one episode, there was one of the Power Rangers, because they were all like basically
Hmm.
teens. They called them teens with attitude, and they thought like, oh, kids want to look up to Power Rangers, and after a while the ratings started to sag, so they thought, oh, maybe kids look up to just like kids, like maybe if they're a Power Ranger they'll like enjoy that, and so they made a kid the Power Ranger, but because like it's taken from like Power Rangers, like all the fight scenes of them like in their costumes are taken from like Japan, like another show. They would just include a sequence where the kid who was not the same size as like the person he was matching in the footage from, they would include a sequence of him like his body just growing every single time, and they would never explain why that happened. But yeah.
Right.
But I do want to start off by
We had to be
talking about
taller for the monsters.
yeah, yeah. I do want to start off by talking about Cousin Oliver, the famous Saving the Show edition from the Brady Bunch. Um,
Yeah, Cousin Oliver. Yeah.
so the Brady Bunch was a sitcom. It ran from 1969 to 1974, and like a ratings decline led the producers to add like a younger child because they thought it would refresh the show. And he was introduced as this like kind of cute little kid to bring like this like adorable energy to the show. Um, Unfortunately, audiences knew exactly what like they were doing with the show, and it seemed very forced. Um, and it became one of the most infamous like examples of like a ratings desperation move, and that's where the term Cousin Oliver syndrome comes from in shows. And Robbie Rist, the actor who played Cousin Oliver, uh, he was widely known for being like a character audiences disliked. And despite like he was on this show, The Brady Bunch, like he actually wasn't on it for that long either. He was only on the last season,
Uh-huh.
and it just didn't really work out. And it kind of shows how like fame doesn't always equal approval, because he wasn't more famous, more of infamous in this term.
Yeah, it kind of killed his career in a way, and he was just a kid.
Yeah. The only other thing I know him from are I think he was the voice of one of the turtles in
Yeah.
those live action movies where they like actually had like the suits that Jim Henson's company made.
Mm-hmm. Cowabunga, dude.
Yeah. Radical.
Yeah. Yeah, poor Robbie Rist. Yeah, he was just a little kid. He had some success, I think, prior to being on the Brady Bunch quite a bit. John Denver was another character, celebrity back in the 70s, and he was very popular for a while. And Robbie Rist kind of looked like a baby John Denver, and so they used that to effect in some things. And he was quite a popular kid actor when he got on the Brady Bunch. And then that whole debacle kind of brought him down a bit. But that's the thing about, why they brought in Cousin Oliver was because everybody grew up.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to have the Brady Bunch grow up, because they're, Bobby and Cindy were the little kids and now they're growing up. And so they wanted to kind of put something in at the bottom there to be the cute little kid. And they did it with, Growing Pains was another
Yeah.
sitcom that brought in a young kid. I mean, all the sitcoms, it seems like, that had kids always try to bring in a young kid to keep it going a little longer.
Yeah.
Leonardo DiCaprio was on Growing Pains.
Growing
Does anybody
Pains,
remember
yeah.
that?
The last season.
Yeah, he was an attempt to make another heartthrob character like the oldest son, which I'm blanking on his name, but
Oh, Kirk Cameron? Or was he the
Kirk
oldest?
Cameron's character, yeah, Kirk Cameron's character was getting old, and so they were trying to bring in another Kirk Cameron, and so it just never works out. But it's kind of like Jump the Shark, which actually came from Happy Days.
Yeah.
Same kind of term, and it's come all the way now, and nobody hardly remembers. It was Fonzie actually jumping a shark on skis
Yeah.
in an episode of Happy Days. Just like Cousin Oliver was a character that Robbie Rist played, and it just didn't go over. But they do it over and over again because it's like they don't want
Because
it to
sometimes it
die,
does
right?
work out,
Uh,
There
Give
are
me
because there
one.
is okay, so it kind of worked out, but then teetered out towards the end. So, for example, in Scooby-Doo, so Scooby-Doo appears in
Hmm.
'69, very popular show. Just hit my mic. Very popular show, and it goes on up until about 78, 79. That's where it's starting to like, get kind of the formula gets a bit tired. Like everyone knows what's
Hmm.
going to happen. I would have done it, or if it wasn't a few meddling kids and your mangy dog, all that kind of stuff.
Jinkies. Yeah.
Yeah, and then so in 1979 they introduce a younger nephew of Scooby's called Scrappy-Doo,
Yeah.
and
Puppy power.
yeah, Puppy Power, and that ends up actually saving the show. Like ratings are very high. But there's a problem around the same time. They're having trouble getting the actors for Fred, Daphne, and Velma, like to consistently come to the studio all the time. And I think they're also having pay disputes, if I remember correctly. And so after a couple seasons with Scooby, Scrappy, and the rest of them, they just decide, you know what? Well, I feel like Casey Kasem and um Don Messick and whoever voiced Scrappy can just kind of do it on their own. And
Hmm.
so because of that, because they got rid of those three characters, it was just Scooby, Scrappy, and Shaggy from like 83, 84 until the end of the decade. Aside from one show where they quickly brought back Daphne and
Daphne,
like
right? Daphne and
another
Shaggy.
character
Yeah.
named Chim Cham or something like that. It was in the 13 Ghost series where
Oh,
they had
right.
Vincent
Yeah.
Price. But aside from that, they're pretty much gone the entire decade.
Hmm.
And everyone thought, of course, blames Scrappy for ruining the show. I don't even think he was that annoying most of the time. Like he said his catchphrases, but it's like he said them once or twice an episode, and it's like Scooby, Scooby. To be honest, you're a coward for most of the show. Like Scrappy's willing to go get his hands dirty, actually fight these ghosts
Sure.
and these people that are in costumes and stuff like that. And I feel like nobody appreciated that. And people had just had such a disdain for Scrappy after the fact that he hasn't appeared as like a normal character since like the 1980s. And when he has appeared, it's usually been as a joke, either as like some kind of like cutaway joke in like a future cartoon series, or
Hmm.
in the live action movie, he was the villain. The
Right.
2002
Yeah.
movie. Yeah.
Well, now having been a kid watching Scrappy Doo on cartoons myself, that I'm older. He was annoying. He was
Mm.
very annoying, and even as a child, I remembered he was annoying. So you're cutting him some slack
Yeah, I
because
guess.
of time, but at the time that it was on, yeah, Scrappy killed the vibe, as it were, with the rest of Scooby Doo. Because the whole idea is Scooby and Shaggy are cowards. You
Yeah.
know, they just want to eat and sleep and kind of hang out. Right? They're
Yeah.
the ne'er do wells of the group. And then Scrappy wants to get involved and do everything. So I think time has been kinder to Scrappy than maybe the people at the time were treating him, because he was really annoying, and it was not the same kind of show, because you could as a kid at that time, you're like, I want to be like Scooby and Shaggy and just kind of hang out and eat and do my thing. Where Scrappy wants to actually do, get in and do things where that's not what the thing that's not what the fun of the show was kind of laughing at those two characters and how they reacted in certain situations. And so Scrappy kind of flipped it a little bit, and I don't know. I think trying to think back all these years, I think I pretty much thought he was kind of annoying. I wasn't rooting for Scrappy, I'll put it that way.
Okay.
I wasn't happy for Scrappy to be on the show. I mean, he was there, you can't do anything about it. You watch
Yeah.
it, but it wasn't like everybody was like, "Yeah, I'm Scrappy." Usually people would emulate the other characters over him, because he was just kind of annoying.
Mm.
Unfortunately, sorry, Camdy.
Hey, I'm not like this isn't like the ultimate just give him a second chance. I was just saying that like it wasn't all his fault, is what I was
Yeah.
saying.
Well, no, it never is, I don't think. I think all these things get they become blown out of proportion because somebody puts a pin on it, right? So
Yeah.
they're like, just like Cousin Oliver, they're just like, "Oh, you're taking the turn like Cousin Oliver back in the Brady Bunch." And so I think the interesting thing is, you could say, is that they were popular enough to be noticed, right? But it just didn't work. And so the thing would be that if you were to, if you go into the multiple realities, there's a reality where Cousin Oliver right now still has a show, and it's the most
That would be
popular show
crazy.
ever, right? Same thing with Scrappy, because there was just something a little bit off, and it threw, and because we wouldn't even remember him if he wasn't popular enough to be memorable. If he was just a blah thing, there would not be Cousin Oliver syndrome, because it would have been so blah no one would even noticed. So he did have an impact, even though it became a negative impact. That the actor and the character wasn't the negative impact. It's just what happened, and so then everybody's like, Cousin Oliver came along and the show tanked. But chances are, honestly, that show was going to be over anyway, because it was about this, weird, this amalgam of a family, right? At the time, they were, a widower, widowers with 6 kids, which was kind of novel.
Yeah.
And so that was that without the kids, as the kids grow up without the kids, then it's not the same show. And so it needed to become another show. They should have done like what Big Bang Theory could have went on and on, but they decided to jump back and do Young Sheldon, and now they're doing the new show with his brother and his wife, and so they're moving it around so that it's a different show, right? It's not. I mean, it has the same characters. You get to pull in the same characters and have kind of that feel, but you don't have. It's not a linear kind of thing. So you're in slightly different worlds with um, similar aspects to them, where I think if the Brady Bunch would have did something like that, then they probably would have survived. They were trying to keep it linear, right? They were trying to keep it, keep it going. Then they would have just added more kids. Oh, well, we'll just take on our cousin's kids, and, we'll adopt some kids, but that the audience doesn't want that. The audience wants what it had to continue, and so you have to take the kind of the feeling of that show and move it to a new location or a new set of circumstances, but the same feeling, and then people will kind of follow you, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I have two more examples of kind of outliers in this kind of Cousin Oliver thing. The first one is one of the more extreme examples of what you do when something's not working. Um, I don't know if you remember Married with Children,
Uh-huh.
but yeah, I watched the show in reruns, of course, because I wasn't alive when it was on the air. But
Right.
um, at one point, they introduce a kid to that show.
Hmm.
Um, in a way similar to Cousin Oliver, just like a cute kid to kind of throw off the balance and see how it like affects the dynamic. And his name was Seven.
Hmm.
And it did not work from like the very start and did not improve. So but they were like had this kid. They just introduced a whole kid, and they decided to just write him off. Like he just
Hmm.
disappears. Like just one episode he's there, and then the next episode he's not. And I've always found it kind of funny, especially for that show, because of how ridiculous it is sometimes.
Right.
Um, that they even make jokes about like, oh hey, where's Seven?
Hmm.
They'll just do that in a random episode, and then they'll just like go back to like not talking about him again for like another 20 episodes.
Right. Yeah, and I think it went on for a while after that. To be honest with you, I did not watch the episodes with Seven. I do remember when it first came on, because it was quite a controversial show.
Hmm.
And Fox was a new network at the time, and And so you watched Fox because it was the young network, and so they were doing things that were kind of, brash and interesting. And but the
Trying
funny
to get
thing about
ratings.
that
Yeah.
is, yeah, the funny thing about that is really the show wasn't about the kids. The show was about the dad,
Yeah.
essentially, and about how he had to deal with his realities, right? He never really changed. It was just, how did he deal with all these people in his life, and some of them were kids and they grew up and he still had to deal with them, and his wife, and his kind of existence as a shoe salesman was, so heavy on him. He didn't want to be that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's interesting. But that throwing away characters seems to be the way that television, if it's not working, get rid of it, because they will switch actors and switch characters and drop people, and the show goes on. And a lot of times with popular shows, that's probably the best way to handle it, because otherwise, if you kind of overly commit to it, then it just drags you down.
Yeah.
But that worked out for Married with Children, and they went on. I don't think they went on much longer, but it had already been on for quite some time at that
Yeah. It
point.
ran like 10 or so years.
Yeah, and lucky for them, you know, uh, David Faustino didn't grow the whole time he was on the show. They must have just fed him cigarettes or something. And and he's the same size. And then Christina Applegate obviously started a little bit older, so she changed, but it was fairly quick. Her transformation was fairly quick in show years.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was, but they had other, characters come and go. And I think but they always stayed true to the kind of the core of the show, where I think with, the Brady Bunch and Cousin Oliver, they kind of did a big, massive shift to this little kid,
Yeah.
where, they shouldn't have done that. It's an ensemble. They have to give everybody something to do. And I don't think they were doing that. I think they were, reacting to the situation in the ratings and saying, "Oh, we have to show this kid in order to bump the ratings." But now, that you don't hear so much about ratings anymore. You hear about people, you hear about numbers, but you don't hear about
Yeah.
ratings. So it used to be, back like in the 90s, let's say 2000, early 2000s, 90s. It was all about the ratings. Like today, the Super Bowl is going to happen. We're recording this on the day of the Super Bowl. Oh, the ratings are through the roof. We got it, whatever. Now they talk about numbers, because the internet has changed the way everyone talks about these kind of things. And there's no rating, because the rating was a closed system that was only for these particular, like the networks, right? It was only for the networks. And so now it's an open system. And so they got to talk about how many views, how many, engagements, how many eyeballs did you have on something, because that is now relevant to people. And the funny thing is, the fact that we're still talking about Cousin Oliver and everything, that has gotten more attention than any rating they would have ever gotten,
This is true.
which is weird, right? So
Yeah. Something
Robbie
just
Rist
stick
should
with you.
come on. Robbie Rist and Ted McGinley, who was actually on Married with Children, who's the show killer. That's his moniker, I think, is a show killer, because he was on Love Boat at the end, and then he was on these other shows. But he didn't kill Married with Children, oddly enough. They
Yeah.
should get a show together. They should have a show, I think, because that would be great, right? It'd be
Yeah.
those
Just call it
two.
the show killers. It lasts
Yeah,
like one
the
season.
show killers. I'm sure there's some other people that I can't think of that are like that, but those
Yeah.
two come to mind because you mentioned the Married with Children. So
The last example I have is actually a really interesting one, where Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they introduce the main character Buffy gets a sister in the last 2 seasons of the show. And at first people were just thinking, oh, is this like just like people are just doing this to to save ratings. The show's doing decent. I don't think they need to
Mhm.
do that. But then, like, it turns out it was like strategically planned. Like, it was a whole storyline, including like the death of a main character and how like the introducing this new character like affected that character and stuff like that. And it's just really interesting to see how they like planned it. And but at the same time, you also have this actress, um, who is no longer with us, unfortunately, Michelle Trachtenberg, who quickly
Mhm.
had to go and like win over the audience, and she did in an amazing way because everyone loves that character.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just think that that's probably the biggest success story out of all the ones we've mentioned today. That like it
Yeah.
can like really work, especially if you do it right.
Well, and you just never know. So, but the funny thing is that it happened before. It's just people don't remember. So, Family Matters, which was a
Ooh,
show in the late '80s, Urkel took over the show.
yeah,
Urkel was a one episode character that literally changed that show, and it went on still, right? So it was supposed
yeah,
to be Carl and his wife and their kids. So it was kind of like a, Brady Bunch for the '90s, if you will,
yeah,
late '80s, and then Urkel came into the scene, and boom, it's the Urkel show, and they still had all the characters and everybody still interacted and so forth. But that would be one where it did the exact opposite of the Oliver effect, right? So
yeah,
another one that, oddly enough, if we go back, is Happy Days. Fonzie
mm,
is this was a show about Richie Cunningham, and it still kind of was, but Fonzie really took over that show because of his popularity, just like Urkel. And
yeah.
so,
And then Richie leaves eventually.
so it's, but no one, they don't call it the Urkel effect or the Fonzie effect, or, I mean, you can go on and on. And for Taxi, Latka Gravas was on that show. He kind of, had a big bump and took over for Judd Hirsch's character at that time. And so, yeah, I mean, they kind of did a lot of focus on him. He got married, and all this kind of stuff. And so, but yeah, I mean, it really is kind of hit and miss. And so that's why they keep trying it, I suppose, is because, because sometimes it really works and these things just click, and it, takes these things off into the stratosphere, these shows. But it's interesting that we don't think about that, and we don't have a name for it, right? We don't call it the Oliver effect or whatever.
Yeah.
So because, and it's happened. What we just had, what, 3, 4 examples, and so hopefully somebody can jump in there and
Yeah.
be so
Somebody's
good
got to
that
have some research
they
paper
get
about that.
yeah, they got they got to have a character name or an actor that gets associated with that. But we, as as humans, we tend to fixate on the negative. You can have one negative comment to somebody kills 5 positive ones, right? It we we perceive negativity way stronger than we perceive positivity as people. And so I think that's probably one of the big reasons why this happens, is because the negative really outweighs the positive in a lot of things. And so, we're like, oh, we'll stick with that. We'll think about that rather than think about the good stuff that's
Yeah.
happening.
Actually, one last point before we close. I wanted to talk about, you mentioned Family Matters and Happy Days, and that actually goes
Uh-huh.
to something I actually wanted to cover in like a future episode. I call it going up the stairs syndrome because Richie in Happy Days has an older
Right.
brother in the first season that his
Chuck.
last appearance, yeah, he goes upstairs at the end of an episode in season 1, and that he is never seen or mentioned again. And
Never
the same
seen
thing
again.
for Family Matters. There's a third kid, so
Mm.
there's Eddie, there's
Mm-hmm.
Laura, and then there's the third child,
Laura.
Judy Winslow. After about the
Mm-hmm.
4th or 5th season, I don't know if there was some kind of contract negotiation failure, but she's just
Right.
like in one episode, and then afterwards you look at all like the family portraits and everything, she's gone from them. They always
Right.
mention from that point on that they only had 2 kids. They don't
Right.
recast her, they
Yeah.
don't do anything. Like, it's just,
Yeah. Well, the funny thing they say, if you kind of read into stuff and everything, the part of the reason that Chuck was gone was because of Fonzie. Fonzie became the older brother, right?
uh,
He was the one that Richie turned to for advice, and they didn't need Chuck. Chuck was waste, right?
yeah,
Chuck was not, and unfortunately, the actor who played Chuck, I mean, and this has to do with a lot with things that people don't think about on the other side of the TV, right? When you're creating it and so forth, there's a way different mindset than when you're watching it. And so Chuck was not a good actor.
oh,
Chuck was there and Chuck did his bit, but Chuck had no charisma. And, Fonzie had all the charisma. I mean, people loved seeing him on screen and his portrayal. And Chuck was just a cardboard stand up for the most part. And unfortunately, that's what happened. Same thing with, you talk about Urkel, Jaleel White, uh, as a kid, genius,
yeah,
just genius doing his acting, right? He's acting and coming up with stuff and giving everybody what they want to see because it's so funny, and he's such a character, right? And then the kind of playing off the other people. So if you look at Urkel and Carl, right, their scenes together were just magical because Carl is so good at reacting to Urkel. And if you don't get that from the actors, then it doesn't come through. But as viewers, we don't think about that so much. We just know what we like, right? We're
yeah,
like, like dogs and cats. We know we like this food. We don't like that food. And so we don't think about what goes into it. But, these artists that were acting, really, really clicked. I think one of the faults with Robbie Rist was he was a great, cute kid, but and he made an impact, but he wasn't at that point where he um was really that great of an actor. He was there in the scene and he did his bit and everything, but he wasn't wooden, but he wasn't fantastic. But I think some of these other ones, like you talked about, Michelle Trachtenberg, right?
yeah,
Fantastic actress and really brought things to life. And so now you connect with the audience, and it's off to the races. Everything goes well. Whereas if you don't totally connect, you can still be fairly decent, but it's just not going to happen on these things. But yeah, it's very interesting, the going up the stair. But they did that with they switch actors. They talk about I think they still call it, well, they may call it something else now, but the Darren Syndrome was from Bewitched because they switched her husband
yes,
a long time ago. This is way back in the 60s. One Darren became another Darren, and so you had Darren, was two different actors because the actor had some health problems, and so,
yeah,
but everybody bought it and it kept going, right? So it worked out. Same thing with Scrubs, or no, with Roseanne. Roseanne, I think it's Scrubs because she was
oh
on
yeah, the
Scrubs as
daughter,
well. But
yeah,
Roseanne's daughter changed, right? So you had, and then they changed it again for the new show. The old, I can't remember all the actors' names, but the old daughter came back to the show, and so it's interesting because we're, as viewers, I don't think that we care that much. We just want a good show. We want to be
yeah,
entertained. We want to connect with people. And so that's why these things happen. But, on this side of it, when we're talking about it, you're like, oh, there's a lot that goes into this, as far as trying to get connection with the audience and how that one person, that one artist can really, change the way things go, because you just don't get as much now. We need a new term. We can't call it really television anymore because it doesn't just happen on the television. It's streaming, right? So there's much
yeah,
streaming content as we have these days. Most of the actors really aren't very good if we think about it, and there's only a few that really jump out. You're like, oh my gosh, this is really a great performance. But that's the way it's always been, oddly enough, even with less choice, because you still have to fill the scene. And so it's wild to think that uh, you know, how that differs in shows with all that stuff. So, um, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think you used Buffy as the example there at the end, and I think that was, I think, a very well written and well acted show, and everybody really enjoyed it. Um, and I think that's why it survived. I think with if we go back to Oliver and compare at that point in time, it really wasn't a very well written show. They
Yeah.
had kind of run their course, and they were just trying to hold on. So I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And yeah, it all depends on depends on circumstances. So, yeah. All right. Well, I think I'd like to close it out on that note. I'd like to thank you, Bob. I thought this was a really good discussion on TV.
Oh yeah.
And I'd like to implore fans, if you liked hearing Bob, please go and listen to his show. What is your show called again?
So it's Static Radio, staticradio.com, at Static Radio on the socials. And we just tell stories. Trying to think what my story. Oh, last week my story was about a guy who who was driving a car dealership. I'm assuming it was like the mechanic's truck, because it had a name emblazoned on the side, was getting high the whole time he was driving down the road, because the whole cab was filled with smoke, and you could smell it. It was kind of funny though, because you have to listen to the story, but I drove behind him for quite some time. But it was a very funny situation that came about, me witnessing that.
Okay. Well, yeah. Hopefully everyone will go and give it a listen. And yeah, thank you again, Bob. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Have a great day and take care.